Before Geraint, the enemy's scourge, I saw white horses, tensed, red. After the war cry, bitter the grave. Before Geraint, the unflinching foe, I saw horses jaded and gory from battle. After the war cry, a great driving force. Before Geraint, the enemy of tyranny, I saw white horses, white with foam. After the war cry, a terrible torrent. In Longborth I saw the rage of slaughter, and biers beyond all number, and red-stained men from the assault of Geraint. In Longborth I saw the clash of swords, men in terror, bloody heads, before Geraint the Great, his father's son. In Longborth I saw spurs, and men who did not flinch from the dread of spears, who drank their wine from bright glass. In Longborth I saw the weapons of men and blood fast dropping, after the war cry, a fearful return. In Longborth I saw Arthur's heroes, who cut with steel, the emperor, ruler of our labour. In Longborth Geraint was slain, a brave man from the region of Dumnonia, and before they were overpowered, they committed slaughter. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, wheat their fodder, ruddy ones swooping like spotted eagles. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, grain was given them, ruddy ones, swooping like black eagles. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, restless over their grain, ruddy ones, swooping like red eagles. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, grain scattering, ruddy ones, swooping like white eagles. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, with the pace of the stag, with a nose like that of consuming fire on a wild mountain. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, satiated with grain, grey ones with their manes tipped with silver. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, well deserving of grain, ruddy ones, swooping like grey eagles. Under the thigh of Geraint, swift chargers, long their legs, having corn for food, with the assault of brown eagles. When Geraint was born, open were the gates of heaven. Christ granted what was asked, beautiful the appearance of glorious Prydain. Right. Hey everyone. I hope you enjoyed my little rendition of Marinad Geraint, the Grave Elegy of Geraint. We're going to have a look at Geraint ap Erbin today and his holy family. I was really triggered to do this by reading a little bit of Journey to Avalon by Barber and Pickett. And it really reminded me of this really long interest I've had in this king of Devon called Geraint, which started with Wilson and Blackett and has just sort of reoccurred through various books that I've sort of read. After sort of visit to Cornwall and having a look at some inscribed stones with Adam as well, this sort of family just keeps on reoccurring. So yeah, I really wanted to do a good deep dive on it. And we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, so what we'll do, I mean, we'll have a look. They're very much, well, I'll get into it really in a minute, but I think the title just sums it up, shows the links between Wales and the West Country, a link to an Arthur, a very real Arthur in Southeast Wales in the 6th century. And we're going to have especially through Geraint and his family, and we'll have a little bit of a look at the Battle of Longborth as well, because it's quite a popular one when it comes to British history and Arthuriana. Longborth is quite a popular subject to look at, and quite a few people have had a go at it. But Wilson and Blackett is definitely easily the most compelling version of events for me, and I just want to sort of go over a couple of versions of it and then bring it back to Wilson and Blackett and why I think theirs is the one for me personally. So these are the books we're going to have a look at. There's a bit of a mix here. So we've obviously got Journey to Avalon by Barber and Pickett and Artorius Rex Discovered. These are both sort of what I class as, Arthuriana, Grail scholarship type books. Then we've got some bit more classic sort of antiquarianism. This sort of book from the 19th century is what year was it? 1900. It was printed. So we've got something a little bit older. Looking at these things. Then we've got some very academic stuff. So we've got this is the Triads, but this is Rachel Bromage's edition. So it's got loads of notes, very sort of mainstream academic stuff. And the same goes for Peter Bartram. You can get this PDF online. I'm just really nerdy, so wanted the hard copy. Spent loads of money on it. But you can get these online. So I'm quite happy reading big chunks of these out because, they, as I say, this is freely available. With the other ones, I'm going to try and cut it a bit so I'm not just reading out for free other people's stuff. I don't want to get in trouble over that. I mean, I know it's fine with the Wilson and Blackett. I'm sure that's fine as well. But and with the academic stuff. But and then lastly as well, we got this book here, John Fletcher's Western Kingdom. So this is a bit more of a recent academic, but it's a bit more of a sort of a popular book as well. You know, it's for a popular audience rather than sort of being hard academia like the other two. I've been talking about this book since I started coming on the channel, and it's quite sad because there's loads of stuff in this book I love and I think it's really good about how Saxon history has sort of been pushed onto Devon a bit, and actually it was a much more slower process than is generally presented, and this book is great at that. But I'm going to look at this book for his opinion on Geraint at the Battle of Longor, which I completely disagree with. So, sorry, John Fletcher. I love your book, but the first time I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to disagree with it. But never mind. So, yeah, they're the books we're going to be looking at. And where are we going to kick off? Where should we start? Oh, right, yeah. So we got the family of Geraint here. So. This is sort of to give you an introduction at some of the names we're going to be looking at and start to see where some of the confusions might come as well. So right up here we have Geraint's grandfather, which is Constantine the Blessed, this son of Magnus Maximus. So straight away we've got a confusion. This is something that crops up a lot with Arthuriana, because one of these strange coincidences that seems to happen with both Arthurs 1 and 2 is they are succeeded by a Constantine. I think this is something that's said by Geoffrey of Monmouth, and it seems to be true in both cases. Both Arthur 1, Constantine the Blessed would have been his brother or half brother or something like that, and was either a successor of or ruled a different part of Britain simultaneously with Anundi, Androgathius, Arthur 1, and also in the terms of Arthur 2, he was succeeded by Constantine, or Constantine, as I put here, Constantine Cornwall, Constantine of Cornwall, who is the Constantine who is berated by Gildas in De Exedio. So already we've got a chance for confusion, where we have one Constantine can be mixed with the other Constantine, you know, and where people say, oh, there's some sort of chronological issue or issue with the genealogies, because how can he be his grandfather and his grandson? Well, the name just reoccurs. You just need to separate out the personalities. Yeah. We'll touch on Erbin a little bit. We'll look at Geraint, and we'll look at the Triad as well, which gives him this name, the Geraint, the fleet owner. We'll look at the sons of Geraint. We've got, this is just one set of names, but we'll look at how their names are variously represented. But a good list here. We've got Cadwy, Kungar, Selyf, and Yestin. Then we've got some famous grandsons of Geraint, St. Cubby, who's Selyf's son and is, you know, very, very prominent in Wales. And as I said, Constantine. And then, just for a little bit more confusion, probably 2 generations later, but still probably on this same line, we have another Gerontius, who is from the 8th century, I believe, but that'll come up in a minute. We should find out. So we got 2 Geraints at least, 2 Constantines, and we've got some names which appear in various different forms. So there's a lot ample room for confusion
and conflation, yeah.
Yeah, and conflation, absolutely. So we'll see what's happened. No, we're going to look at Journey to Avalon. That's the next bit I want to do. So this is the sort of section that really sort of got me bringing these together. Significant Dark Age connections in Cornwall. While it is easy to pour scorn on the legendary accounts of Arthur's life, it is, on the other hand, particularly fascinating to examine places which really do have authentic connections with personalities who lived at the same time as Arthur and came into contact with him. During the Dark Ages, an important royal family ruled Dumnonia, the area we know today as Devon and Cornwall, and Arthur, king of the Silures, was related to them. It is necessary to remember the story of Constantine the Blessed, so this is Geraint's grandfather, who was son of Magnus Maximus. When Constantine was an infant, his father was killed in 388. After spending many years in exile in Armorica with his kinsman Aldwer, he returned to Britain with St. Garmon, that's another important name I'll come back to in a second, and expelled the Irish settlers from Gwynedd. Constantine was then elected Pendragon of the Confederated States of Britain. He ruled until 443, when either he died of the plague or was assassinated by Vortigern. Constantine's son, Erbin, then fled from North Wales in fear for his life and settled in Cornwall, where he raised a family and died in about 480. So, just a quick mention of Garmon there. St. Garmon is often Latinized to Germanus. So therefore is also then conflated with Germanus of Auxerre, who's a Catholic saint who was sent to put down Pelasgians. Yeah. So he came as the sort of the Catholic Church answer to this British heretic.
Right.
And you'll find that he gets a lot of church foundations and all these names and all this credit, but actually not a lot of it's actually to do with him, and is actually to do with Garmon of Man, who is a truly British saint and became bishop in Isle of Man. He's known as Germanus of Man, Garmon of Man. Yeah. Anything else from there? No, I think that's good for that. So what this is showing is we've got some very real people who we can trace through the lineages, you know, from North Wales to Cornwall, and who are associated with Arthur in the 6th century, and we can trace them to real places. So this is Constantine Bay in Cornwall. Padstow is named after St. Petroc Stowe. I think Petroc will come up a few times as one of these sort of people who's additional to the to these people we're looking at. Is there any other interesting names around here? Lundy Bay. I mean, Lundy Island's not far off. Holy Island. This point here, so where my cursor is, I'm not sure if you can see, around here, this is where the Time Team dig was. If you can have a look on YouTube, it's called From Cornwall to Constantinople, or From Constantine to Constantinople. And here they found a trading post that was used from the pre-Roman period right through the Roman period, but they continued living in roundhouse style buildings, not in Roman buildings. And right through to the 6th century, they were finding Turkish, North African tableware, really fine stuff, glassware, gold coins, all sorts of stuff. So this could be named after either Constantine. I wouldn't like to say for sure which one, but you immediately see that these people are remembered and in certain places in Cornwall, and we've got the archaeological evidence to show there was people of importance during these periods in these places. Right, who's next? Geraint. Well, who else? Cool. So we're going to have a look at a few entrances in this book in Peter Bartram's Welsh Classical Dictionary. You see I've put a few names up here. I think these are all the ones I'm going to read from. I'll let you know if there are any other names presented. But these are the various ways you see them. So we have a Geraint or a Gerenius, sometimes recorded, sometimes Saint Gerenius. Then we have Gerontius. This is the 7th century king who is. This is very interesting because his letters between him and Bishop Aldhelm demonstrate the differences between the British Church and the Catholic Church at the Saxon Church at the time.
Wow.
Aldhelm is in his very flowery Latin.
Yes.
Asking Geraint to control his bishops.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. So Gerontius, although he's not where we're going, he's a couple of centuries later to what we're looking at the moment. But he's nevertheless an interesting character. And some of these things will come up as I'm reading. And then obviously we have Geraint ap Erbin, who died at the Battle of Longor. And I'm finding that all three of these names, people, we definitely have at least two people, the later Geraint and the earlier Geraint. But as you'll see, that some people think there's even more involved. But we'll go through. So I'm going to read this one. This one is entitled Geraint of Cornwall, a king of Cornwall mentioned in the life of St. Tilo in the Book of Llandaff. It tells that during the ravages of the Yellow Plague in Britain, Tilo was advised by an angel to go to Armorica. He came first to Cornubia, Cornwall, and was well received by Gerenius, king of that country. At the king's request, Tilo received his confession and promised that the king would not see death until he received the body of the Lord, which he, Tilo, himself would have consecrated. So he wants to receive mass from Tilo, I assume. But while in Armorica, Tilo became aware that Gerenius was very sick and about to die. In order to keep his promise to Gerenius, he returned to Britain, having completed 7 years and 7 months in Armorica. He and his party arrived at the harbour of Dingerien and found the king still alive. The king received the sacrament and joyfully departed to the Lord. His body was buried in a vast sarcophagus which had been miraculously transported across the sea from Armorica. This is about dating. This is Bartram talking. If we accept the story of the date of death of Gerenius, must be put to 7 years after the beginning of the Yellow Plague in Britain, if it's the same plague that killed him. 547. So again, we've definitely got a 6th century Geraint here that we're looking at. There's no doubt about that. Contemporary with Tilo, contemporary with the Yellow Plague.
Yeah.
There is a church and parish of Geraint near Falmouth in Cornwall, the dedication being presumably to this Gerenius. The date of celebration being August 10th. It is called Ecclesia de Sancto Gerendo and Saint Geraint. There is a Kilgerran in St. Anthony and Roseland. Various other places. Patroclus, St. Kevin as well, and the Cadocus as well. So he's mentioned in all these sorts of lists of saints, things like that. And here, if you have a look at the map, we'll see this place. So St. Justin the Roseland is the place I waxed lyrical about on the Cornish video. One of these places that claims to have been visited by Christ as a child and Joseph of Arimathea. We can see that right opposite of it, we got Gerrans, and this is the place. We've got Pors Cadw here, so Cadw is probably his son Cadwy, and we'll get to Cadwy in a minute. Any interesting other names? Well, we got fuck up here. I won't even pretend to know how to pronounce that, but yeah. So yeah, we can see this place name again through the place name evidence. These people being linked together.
Percule. That's
Percule. It's interesting that I could spend ages over maps of like Wales and Cornwall just trying to decode every single name.
Yeah.
And play. I absolutely love doing it.
Absolutely.
There's a quick note here about a place which is believed to be has had stories about it being Geraint's burial mound in Cornwall, but it's apparently that tradition does not go back very far. Apparently, so you take it. Apparently, there was maybe one antiquarian who felt like it should be, basically.
Yeah.
And now I just want to dive back quickly into this book, because this sort of is just a little bit from Thomas Taylor's Celtic Christianity of Cornwall, because just to hammer home this point, which is why I'm sort of interested in this. So just a bit of context, he's discussing basically the pre-Saxon bishoprics of Cornwall, and where they could have been from various other information. So he picks out places which seem to have a lot of importance in later dates, but there doesn't seem to be any reason why. So he reckons that it's because they're very old. Because if you look up on Wikipedia, for instance, it'll tell you the first bishopric was in St. Germans in St. Saltash and was set up by Athelstan in 936. Obviously the first Catholic bishopric of Cornwall.
Yeah.
Even then, he put a Briton in charge as well, which is interesting. Yeah, very good bit of politics. I think. So that there was a monastery bishopric at Dinurrin or Dingerin in the 9th century is clear from Kensteck's profession of obedience to Archbishop Colnoth. To treat of Gerins and its association as an impartial spirit is well nigh impossible. Legend, history, and fact are so strangely and so suggestively interwoven that the temptation is equally great to say too much or too little. The name Gerins is a modern form of Geraint or Gerontius. The presence of Gerins, Just, and Cubby as the names of 3 churches and parishes near together is indeed a remarkable coincidence if they are not identical with Geraint of Anglesey, his son Iestyn or Just, and his grandson Cubby, son of Selyf. No valid reason has been offered against this identification. Mr. Baring-Gould considers St. Gerins the same person as Gerenius, King of Cornwall, who requested St. Tilo to visit and communicate him when dying. Both Geraint and Gerenius must be distinguished from Gerontius, Prince of Dumnonia, to whom St. Aldhelm wrote at the request of an English synod in 705, urging him to abandon the Celtic method of determining Easter and the Celtic tonsure, which the saint described as the tonsure of Simon Magus. All 3 who are here distinguished as Geraint, Gerenius, and Gerontius, though the names are identical, were historical personages and worthy of the veneration of after ages. He then goes on, so he's saying there, which he thinks they're possibly separate people, the saint and the king, but there is a later king, whereas Sabine Baring-Gould believes the king and the saint to be the same person, and I agree with that as well. I think, especially considering the fact that all of his sons were sainted as well.
Yeah.
I think we can probably. That's certainly the way I go with it. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say there's certainly a tradition of Welsh or British kings becoming holy men or a bit more ecclesiastical after their kind of campaigning period, or that period of their life is done. They do go towards that kind of more spiritual side of things later on as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and the Barber and Pickett book really hammers home that point. To the point that they even show about Vortigern's career after he got booted out of Britain. He went to Brittany and shacked up with a prince there and became Saint Vortigern.
Saint Vortigern.
Well, that's the argument they make, and it's very convincing. But I think it's interesting that at that period, any prince or king, you should be looking for a saint with a similar name, and you shouldn't be surprised if they are the same person.
Absolutely. Even if, like Vortigern, some of their actions are unsaintly earlier on.
Absolutely. But I mean, you take some of the worst offenders in British history, like Vortigern or King Mark or something like that, they're still remembered as Maelgwyn, even, you know.
Yes.
Still remembered as giants, you know. I think they're still kings, so you know, don't forget they're still kings. So don't, you know, you can't knock them too badly, can you?
Yeah, no.
But so right, so let's move on to the next listing in Bartram. This one says Geraint Gerontius, king of Dumnonia. So this is probably talking about the 8th century Gerontius. The last independent king of Dumnonia appears to have been an able prince and to have wielded considerable power, as we learn from a letter addressed to him in the year 705 by Bishop Aldhelm, a relation of Einar, king of Wessex. Aldhelm calls him Gerontius. There's notes on where you can find the letter. 12th century edition of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as well. Year 710, Einar, also a nun, his relative, fought with Geraint, king of the Welsh. So they're probably the same people, very similar time period, same name, associated with the same Saxon kings as well. Now, this is interesting. Bartram decides to put this here under this listing. There is a poem in the Black Book of Carmarthen and in the Red Book of Hergest, which tells of a battle fought at a place called Longborth by a chieftain named Geraint. It is very tempting to suppose that Longborth is Langport in Somerset. We'll get to various places in Longborth in a minute. 12 miles east of Taunton, and that Geraint is Gerentius of Aldhelm and the Geraint of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. But there are two difficulties. The title of the poem is Geraint Phil Erbin, ap Erbin. There's a mention of Arthur as well in stanza 8. And both Geraint and Arthur are obviously characters in Arthurian legend, which puts this towards the 6th century.
Yeah.
Then he says, it may be pointed out that the name Erbin does not appear in the text of the poem, so it may have been added later. And he makes this point that the mention of Arthur is almost like mythological, or I'm going to argue with that in a minute, but you know, like an otherworldly sort of reference. Yeah.
Right.
He talks about places you can find translations, etc. There's a sort of short section from it, slightly different translation to the one I used. I just used the one I used because it was free. I don't necessarily think it's a good translation or anything, and I'm not someone to judge on those things, but I used it because it was freely available. And I think that's all I'm going to read from that. But I'd just like to say, I think it's interesting that despite his own problems, he's decided to put the information from Longborth immediately associated with this later Geraint. Already trying to weaken the image of the 6th century knights or kings with Arthur as paramount king.
Yes. Yeah. Very reductive.
Yes, absolutely. Right. This title is Geraint ap Erbin, and with legendary in back brackets. Of course. In the life of St. Cubby, it is said that Cubby was ex region Cornobium, being born between the rivers of the Tamar and the Limar. That's the Liner River now, Lyneher, and we'll have a look at that in a bit. And it says some of the names associated with them. So Salamon. So this is an interesting name. Salamon is Selyvan and also Selyf. So this is all the same person. Salamon is Solomon, obviously, same name. What other name comes up? Erbin comes up, Geraint, and Lud as well. the reason this is brought up is because the genealogy is slightly out of order. They have Geraint or as like a Salamon is in the wrong place. It sort of goes Salamon, Erbin, Geraint rather than Geraint, Erbin. So it's just talking about the problems with the genealogy there. Then it mentions Longborth again briefly with this Geraint ab Erbin. Geraint mab Erbin is mentioned in the tale of Culich and Owen as one of the warriors of Arthur's court and as the father of Cadwy. He's also mentioned in the tale Ron Abwy's dream as Geraint, the father of Cadwy. He is again mentioned in a triad as one of the 3 seafarers of the Isle of Britain. We'll have a look at that in a minute. He appears again as the father of Cadw, so it's again remembering that name. Cadw is also Cadwy. And the son of Erbin in the pedigree, Jesus College, MS20, blah, blah, blah. In Bonedd y Saint, he is mentioned as the father of Selyf, Iestyn, Kungar, and Cadwy, and his wife is said to have been Gwair Furch Amlord Ledig. There's a very interesting point here about Eric and Enid as well. So Eric and Enid, the story in Chrétien de Troyes, we have the later British version of Geraint and Enid.
Right.
Now, whereas with the story of Tristan and Isolde, which I think is very much a story of Brittany and Britain, especially the southwest of Britain, I think that generally the academics are pretty much right about Eric and Enid, and that the original story is Eric and Enid, and then they sort of put these British characters into it at a later medieval date. I don't disagree with the academics on that one. If other people disagree with me and have reason to, that's great, and I'd love to hear it, because I'd love to have my mind changed on that. But where I've read about the story of Eric and Enid and the substitution of the name Geraint, it doesn't seem to fit with what I know about Geraint ab Erbin. So, you know, so I'm sort of sticking with that one. Right, left Arthur's court. So let's have a look at this bit. This is interesting. In such cases, we may therefore take a few hints as to certain Welsh traditions concerning Geraint. We may, for example, suppose that Geraint left Arthur's court at the request of his father Erbin in order to rule the dominions of his father, who was getting old, and that these dominions bordered on the left bank of the Severn. This agrees with the fact that we find Geraint's son Cadwy ruling in Somerset, also that Geraint was cousin to Arthur. Erbin being Arthur's uncle. This is in agreement with the usual pedigree of Erbin. Again, just like Geraint and Erbin, these are people who reoccur with reference to Arthur. Just about the time that we reckon that Arthur at Myrig is ruling as king of the Silures in Glamorgan, and that this family can be found through place names, church dedications, in the places we expect to find them. So all throughout Cornwall, Devon, Monday, Somerset, right up to the Severn. And then also we find them associated with Southeast Wales, and then back with this ancient familial tradition back to Magnus Maximus. We find them in Anglesey and North Wales as well. So yeah, Cadwy's great. And Cadwy has some very interesting confusions going on here as well. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, so this is Cadwy ap Geraint, the entrance. He appears in the life of St. Caranog as Cato, a contemporary of Arthur, reigning in Dindryddov, somewhere in Devon. According to the life, Cato gave to Caranog a place to build a church called Civitas Carov, or Carhampton. He appears as Cadw, son of Geraint ap Erbin, and father of a Peregier as well. In the tale of Culich and Owen, he appears in the list of warriors as Arthur's court, a Cadwy, and in the same way in Rhonabwy's dream, where he is listed as one of the 42 counsellors of Arthur. In a triad, he is called Cadwy ap Geraint, one of the 3 men of Innis Prydain who were most courteous to guests and strangers. In a relatively late version of Boneddi's Saint, he is mentioned as Cadw, Gadr, Cadwy, or Cadw, one of the sons of Geraint ap Erbin. In the 9th century life of St. Wynwallow, I went to St. Wynwallow's church in Cornwall. The saint's father, Frackan, is said to be a cousin of Cadwy, a British king, a cousin of Cadwy, which I assume the name Cadwy is meant to be Cadwy, a man most famous in the eyes of the world. He ruled over Dumnonia. 2 manuscripts of the life of the Breton St. Winoc trace him through the princes of Dumnonia to Rewall. Rewall is one of the early colonizers of Brittany, also called, I think Rewall is also Howell. He's Howell the Great. Rewall Mauer he's known as. And he is in turn traced to Erbin, son of Cadwy Fili Gerontius. And some notes on where the information comes from. So we now know that Cadwy Cato is this person in King Arthur's court, right? We're quite happy with that. This seems to have recurred several times. So let's have a look at Cadw ap Gorneu, legendary. A hero of Cornwall, perhaps the invention of Geoffrey of Monmouth, who calls in Cador, Duke or King of Cornwall. Soon after coming to the throne, Arthur put Cador in charge of an army to go against the Saxons, and he put them to flight. After the Battle of Badon, Arthur left Cador with 10,000 men to pursue the defeated Saxons. He drove them into Thanet and received the surrender of the remnant there. He was present at Arthur's coronation as one of the 4 kings who each bore golden swords before him, according to their right, on that occasion. He is described as a man of merry disposition, took part in Arthur's war against the Romans in Gaul, and was finally slain in Camlan. In this last contest, he is apparently called Cador Limonec, perhaps for Limoneg, the bounding, although possibly the names of 2 different people are run together. Cador was the father of Constantine Custennin, who succeeded Arthur, and Constantine is said to be Arthur's kinsman. So Geoffrey's implying a relationship between Cador and Arthur.
Yeah.
There's more about that. Cador, Earl of Cornwall, is mentioned in the tale of Rhonabwy's dream as the man whose duty it was to put armour on in the day of battle and fighting. He rose with Arthur's sword in hand, and thereupon the host, which had been in a state of excitement, stood still, and the excitement ceased. He is mentioned again as one of the 42 of Arthur's counsellors. In a late triad, he is mentioned as one of the 3 knights of battle in Arthur's court. Cadw does not appear in the tale of Culhwch and Owen, or the early triads, and therefore it seems that he is an invention of Geoffrey of Monmouth. The traditional tomb of Cador is Cadon Barrow, along the coast to the west of Tintagel. So, interesting choice from Bartram. I think it's pretty clear who Cador is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neither is Cadwy, Cadw, Cador. So this is again just sort of showing how the reductionist academics sort of start to sow discontent when seemingly there's something so quite easy to knit together, you know.
Yes, quite right. On pick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this lovely church here, by the way, I believe this is St Kungar's church, and this is in southeast Wales. But beautiful little church here, and we're going to have a look at Kungar now. Let's see if we've got a couple of them, or have we got one Kungar? Yeah, we got a couple of Kungars. This one's spelt with a U rather than a Y. The Saint of Congresbury in Somerset, a monastery called Kungar is mentioned in the 9th century by Asa, and Kungar is the patron of the nearby parish of Badgeworth. In these places, St. Kungar's commemoration was invariably on November the 27th. So they actually keep on talking about this, about feast days of saints.
Yeah.
A way in the past they've decided whether saints are conflations or if they're different people is by comparing the feast days. But I'm just going to go on a little bit of a tangent. My local church is dedicated to St. Dionysius, and that's the Latin version of Dennis, right? Now, if you look up St. Dionysius or St. Denis's, you'll get 3 big contenders. One, St. Dionysius the Areopagite, and he is I think he's a Greek writer from the 4th century. Then you've got St. Denis of Paris, who I think Paris Cathedral is still dedicated to St. Denis, and he's a 4th century Italian, I believe. And then you've got St. Denis of Cornwall, who's also St. Iestyn of Wales, who's 5th, 6th century, right?
Right.
They are all very much considered by the mainstream to be different people. Their feast days are all October the 9th.
Right.
So I don't think the whole feast day thing is a good way of deciding who's who anyway.
No.
I think there might be some confusion between Denis of Paris and Iestyn. I think that's possible. Or Iestyn, as it's pronounced.
Yeah, it could be.
There might be something in there, but by the mainstream they're considered different people. But their way of checking would be the feast days, and they've all got the same feast
same one.
days.
That's a really good.
So I'm not going with that as a way of checking.
Yeah.
Right, back to Kungar. There is a life of which 2 versions exist. The earliest was discovered in 1918, published blah blah blah. This is this is more about the documents and stuff you can find him in. We are told that he was born the son of an emperor of Constantinople, which is a good one.
Yeah.
But we've already seen Constantine Bay in Cornwall. So if his father lived in his grandfather's town, could have been called Constantinople. So and forsaking the life of court, came to Somerset and settled at a place now called Congressbury. The earlier life says Kungar was recalled to the Britons and taught in his native land. So we know he's not from Constantinople.
Yes.
But we didn't think that anyway, really. This shows the true tradition. He was originally from Wales. And this is keeping with his name. I don't think so. Sometimes known as Kungaris, and possibly Docuinus, which is an interesting one. His work has been described in Glamorgan, where he's said to have founded a monastery. And some people think this is invention. Congar seems to be the saint who gave his name to Ingonga, a farm at Llanivit, 2 miles south of Bodmin in Cornwall. There is St. Congard in Morbihan in Brittany. And in both of those places, there's nearby dedications to Cadog and Pedrock as well. So we've got these same people appearing, okay?
Yeah.
Sort of people you'd expect, 6th century Age of Saints.
Yeah.
In the places you'd expect to find them. Brittany, Southwest, Wales. Congar appears in a lot of Brittany place names. Kungar may be the same as Kungar at Geraint. But as the feast is on a different day, the identification is doubtful.
I see.
Right. Okay. So we'll go to the other Kungar now. This is with a Y. Kungar at Geraint. He appears in later versions of Boneddi Sant as the son of Geraint ap Erbin by Gwair Furch am Lord Ledig. His church is given in Llangefni. Oh, this is it. This is his church here. So this is St. Kungar's in Llangefni. He is also a patron of Trefillan in Ceredigion and Hope in Powys Fadog, and his name appears at Ynys Kungar off Cricir. I can't pronounce that. That's in North Wales. I've had a look. In the two lives of St. Cubby is mentioned as one of the disciples of that saint. So he was a disciple of his own nephew. He went with Cubby to the Isle of Arran. He was an old man when Cubby took him there, and they took in a cow with its calf because Kungar couldn't eat solid food, so he could drink the milk from the cow. It's a nice little detail from the life there.
Yeah.
He is mentioned as being of the household of St. Cubby, so there we go. So that's a nice little one. Let's see if we've got more. Let's just have a look ahead. Yeah, let's have a look at this page whilst we read Selyf, because here we have Selyf Stone, and this is in St. Just in Penwith. So we've already got two brothers there.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
Right. Just need to check that I'm spotting all of the name entries.
Yeah.
So there's three here under Selyf. So the first one is St. Salivan, the name of St. Leven near Land's End, Cornwall. Salivan is derived from Salamon and is therefore cognate with the Welsh Selyf. The name appears as Salamon in 12th century list of Cornish parochial saints in a Vatican codex. These are other lists of saints. Dr. Borlase heard stories about the saint when he visited St. Leven in 1740. Is there much more in there? In Brittany, there is a Salivan in the parish of Cadw in St. Salomon, locally pronounced Selwyn, Gwern, and another in Llangollen. All these places are in the Morbihan department, and we've already heard that Kungar has a church in the Morbihan department as well. So again, the family's sticking together wherever you go.
Yeah.
Then we got Selfan ap Geraint ap Erbin. He is mentioned in only one version of Bonevi Saints and a copy in which he is coupled with Iestyn ap Geraint, and is said to be Menmon Alice in Penmon and Lease. Wade Evans pointed out the place is Penwillis, or I think it's pronounced like that, Penwillis, now a farm in Iestyn Mon, not far from Penmon. He is also, so we're up in North Wales now. He has also proposed that Selfan was for Sulian or Julian, the saint of a former Capella St. Suliana in the cemetery of Iestyn, Lun, later called St. Julian's Chapel. Wade Evans also drew attention to St. Salivan of Cornwall without comment. Selyf ap Erbin, the father of St. Cubby. In the life of St. Cubby, he is called Salomon, Erbin Filius, blah, blah, blah. Selyf ap Geraint ap Erbin ap Custenin Gorneu. It appears that both versions are wrong because they're putting the wrong Constantine in the second one, and they're putting, but again, I think if you look at it critically with all of the sources, you can work out who's trying to be described here.
Yeah.
And again, as I say, we're finding the same people in the same places. And then before we move on to... Oh, no, we'll do Iestyn quickly, because there's not a lot on Iestyn. Here we go. In fact, there's very little in this book about Iestyn. So we've got St. Just. The life of St. Just in Penwith and St. Just in Roseland, both in Cornwall. Nothing is known about him, or whether it is the same at each parish. The name just appears in the 10th century list of Cornish parochial saints found in the Vatican Codex, but only one is found in there, not two.
Yeah.
So it's probably the same just. The reference is apparently to St. Justin Roseland, but how William of Worcester calls St. Just a martyr. St. Just of Penwith has been supplanted by a namesake, a martyr in the Roman calendar. The feast at Penwith varies from October the 30th to November the 8th. The feast at St. Justin Roseland is on August the 14th, but as I say, I'm not compelled to think that feast days make a blind bit of difference to these people. They say they're linking just through Roseland, and we've already seen how Roseland is connected to Geraint. And now we have the other St. Just, who has his brother's stone in it.
Yes.
And then the interesting thing about this book is there are no Iestins in it whatsoever.
Oh, right.
Despite the fact that we've read an earlier thing about Geraint that lists off the sons of Geraint, and one of them is called Iestyn. But it doesn't have an entrance for Iestyn. So,
right.
We'll go aside, and we're going to just have a little tangent here as well, because this is the Morgan and Monique stone on the right. I finally found this thing which I complained a lot that you couldn't see the inscription anymore, and I finally found this illustration which looks good to me, in as much as someone hasn't just put in the sort of Latin equivalents of the letters. It looks like these look like, it looks like a 6th century stone. Now, as me and Adam say, a lot of this stuff is open to interpretation, because sometimes academics haven't even tried to interpret it. They've just gone and left it. But I'm going to take a wild stab and say that this could be the stone of Kungar. He is also recorded in a couple of places as Kungan, Cyngen. And you've got this name Janias, which is not quite like Geraint, or Gerontius, as we see, but it does have some similarities. This is only a few miles from the Selyf stone. It's only a few miles from the Roseland Peninsula. I had a look at the name Janias. So the real Latin equivalent is like Gneaus, which is Gneaus. It doesn't have an E here, it just goes GN, and at certain points some people argue it's pronounced as Nias and not as Gunias. But in fact there is actually evidence that in later Latin you did pronounce the G and it was Gunias. Now this name means like birthmark, but it's generally considered by scholars that it took hold as a popular name without that meaning necessarily attached long afterwards. So you wouldn't necessarily expect everyone called Gunias to have a birthmark on them. But what's interesting is this rendering of it, where you put a vowel in as well here, so the G is definitely pronounced, is it makes it look a lot like the word genius. And the original Latin word genius means a father or holy teacher,
right?
Like a godfather almost, which is a very appropriate name for Geraint.
I see what you're
saying, so we have two very similar names again in the right place. And the other point what was the last point? There's only one stone, British inscribed stone with Gerontius, or a name like Gerontius, inscribed on it. And that's up in Wales, and it says Gerontius, son of Spectatus. Spectatus literally meaning the watcher.
The Watcher.
Which is an interesting name, but I can't link it back to Geraint in any way. Whereas I feel like this stone, going back to it, I think there's a strong evidence for saying this could be Kungar ap Geraint. But frankly, I'm just going to take a stab and say it anyway because no one else has offered any other interpretation. I've read a couple and they were both rubbish. One of them was saying that maybe this Nagumi bit is to do with the modern name Meneag, where the store is, and that there was a King Geneg or something like that. But Keneg is not a Brythonic name that I've come across anywhere, so I'm not.
No,
I'm not. No, so yeah, so yeah, I'm going to go that we have two sons of Geraint represented on these stones here, which are in very, very close proximity to each other, and other place names with their families involved. Let me get to Cubby. Cubby's interesting. So, as we said, that note that said he was born between the Tamar and the Limar. I don't know how well we can see on this map, but this is the River Tamar coming up here. And then this valley here is the Liner. So it's only a very small area. When you say someone's from between the Tamar and the Liner, there's not really a lot of options as to where they can actually be from. And where you've got Callington here, and this is considered by a lot of people to be Gellywig. Now, Barbara and Pickett say Gellywig is in South Wales, just as Gorneu is in South Wales. However, Gorneu is also in Cornwall. Gorneu and Gellywig are also in Cornwall and in Brittany, just as we have Dumnonia in Brittany, we have Cornwall in Brittany. All these places are presented, and they say they reckon there's a Gellywig in Brittany somewhere that we just haven't found it yet, essentially.
Right.
And that is because of the real close link between these dynasties. They are family. They are ruling their empire together, basically, and their empire is very closely related. Is essentially South and East Wales with very close connections to Brecon and West Wales, and then very closely related to Brittany and the West Country as well. So we even have here, look, Kelly Bray is still, just outside Callington. There's a really interesting looking enclosed settlement looking thing here, which they say is Neolithic, but looks kind of Iron Age to me. So that. And we've got interesting name here, Caradon Town. I believe Caradoc Vreachfast, who's Caradoc Strong Arm, is very closely related to this family. And there's also a Craddock Moor somewhere nearby as well. Any of the other saints? We've got St. Melian there. Nothing especially out there. So let's have a look at the. Let's have a look at Cubby.
Cubby also having a presence in North Wales as well.
Absolutely. Let's have a. There are two versions of his life. They are similar in matter, but different in style. He is called Kepius or Kebius, son of Salomon, son of Erbin. The later one differs in making him Selyf ap Geraint ap Erbin. This says, which is less probable for some reason, despite the fact that I'm sure earlier in the book he said that that's actually how the genealogy works. He's now saying that that's not working, but I think that's right. This is Cubby, son of Selyf, son of Geraint, son of Erbin. A later version adds that his mother was Gwen, Furch Cunir of Caer Gork in Manu. So, if so, Cubby would be first cousin to St. David, whose mother was Non, Furch Cunir of Caer Gork. However, in the next item, one version makes Gwen the mother of Iestyn ap Geraint. The former version seems better. So there's definitely a familial relationship, whether it's through Kungar or through through Iestyn or through Cubby, to Non and David as well. And that's why in the West Country we have Davidstow as well. So again, the 6th century saints are active in all these areas. They're not just active in one, they are active throughout their nation. Like, these are not just individual kingdoms or fiefdoms or whatever.
Right.
Cubby was born in Cornwall between the Tamar and the Liner. That is the region of which Callington is the principal town. The life tells him that he went to visit Jerusalem as consecration by Bishop Hilary, Bishop of Poitiers, which would put him in the 4th century, so that's probably not quite accurate. However, I wouldn't be surprised if he did make journeys far away. I think, is it Cadw who's said to have journeyed with Iltyd to Jerusalem and Rome, possibly? Right. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was far-reaching travel amongst these people at all.
No, I wouldn't be either.
He returned to his own country and refused a request to be king, and then went forth with his 10 disciples. We've got Mylog, Phlebio, Pulan, Kungar, and the rest. He went to Endeligion, where King Endelig was ruler, and pitched his tent on the king's meadow. Edelig tried to expel him, but was discomfited. Edelig gave Cubby 2 churches. We've got Llangubby on the Usk, and oh God, I can't even pronounce that, in the same parish, where he left a small mottled finger bell. After that, he went to the monastery of St. David in Manu and sojourned there 3 days and nights. Cubby then went to Ireland, to the Isle of Arran, which we've heard before, where he remained for 4 years and built a church there. His kinsman Kungar, being an old man, was unable to eat solid food, so Cubby brought him a cow with its calf. There his disciples bravely tilled the land. Mylog, one of his disciples, annoyed a little man, possibly a local religious man, by digging the ground outside of his door. Cubby and Fintan went together to the abbot, named Enna, and they were pacified. But friction continued between Fintan and Cubby with his disciples, so that Cubby decided to leave the island. He went to Meath, where he stayed for 40 days and nights and founded a church, which to this day is called the Great Church of Mochop, which is in Ireland. But Fintan followed him there and claimed him that this was also his land. So this guy really didn't like Cubby at all. Cubby went to 2 other places, but continued to be pestered by Fintan until Cubby and his disciples entered a boat and arrived in Anglesey.
Right.
So Cubby sojourned for a while at a place called Cundab. Caffo, a disciple of Cubby, was murdered by the herdsman Rossier. Of Newborough, at a place called Merthyr Caffo, now Llangafo. Maelgwyn Gwynedd came across Cubby while hunting, and as usual was discomfited by the saint. Maelgwyn conveyed his fortress, Caergybi, Holyhead, to God and St. Cubby as a perpetual offering of alms. Cubby died there on November the 8th. Cubby is also listed as one of the 7 happy cousins, the others being Bueno, Cordroff ap Caradog, Denial, Serial, and Dewey. So this guy is well recorded, very well recorded. Yeah. And these are 2 of his. So this is one of his. This is the one on the right is the church in Southeast Wales, and then this is the monastery at Caergybi, which I believe that the fortress which Maelgwyn given is his great grandfather's and his Maskenledig's Roman form.
Oh right.
Yeah, and the monastery is inside that. I'm sure I've read that. He's associated with St. Serial. That's a very important association, actually. St. Serial. They're very closely related.
Yeah, absolutely.
3 seafarers, fleet owners of the island of Britain: Geraint, son of Erbin, Gwenwynwyn, son of Nav, and March, son of Merchion. It's interesting that it brings it back to King Mark as well. Geraint and King Mark, both people very with influence in the West Country, in Brittany, and in Glamorgan as well. Yet one of the problems often with identifying March, King Mark, with Conomorus is often said that because King Mark is associated with Glamorgan, he can't have anything to do with the West Country. And
yes,
we've just looked at people who are definitely associated with all areas and have influence relationships with these people. So
this whole thing of keeping people in one place has absolutely got to go. There's too many examples now we've spoken about on this channel of
they often call it the geographical problem, but in my mind there is no problem.
There is no problem
whatsoever.
The only problem is the ones they've created.
Yeah, absolutely. So
nice work, brilliant,
cool. So then I think, are we on to Longdorf? Yeah, right. So sorry if you can't see the map. So this one's quite far out. I just wanted to sort of show where Langport was in relation to some other stuff. Dunster here. This is the place suggested as we mentioned earlier, Dundryddwy or something like that, which was a castle that Cadw ruled from, and Dunster is often thought to be this area. This is the River Parrett. This is where John Fletcher talks about where most of the problems between Wessex and Dumnonia were for a very long time. Whereas, the Anglo-Saxon chronicle, well, not necessarily the chronicle as such, but people interpreting the chronicle like to think that the Saxons were a lot further west and having a lot further power west than this place is. Whereas this book excellently shows that we're probably staying very much in this area. We've got Glastonbury here. Anywhere else? Any other good names that might be? Ilchester comes up a lot with Arthurian stuff sometimes. Oh, actually, one that didn't mentioned. We've got the Cadbury names are around here. Cadbury. So this is actually quite well considered to be a thing. All the Cad names are associated with Cadwy. And Cador. They believe it's a personal name. Immediately when I saw this, I thought, oh well, how do we know that this Cad isn't just Welsh battle? But apparently there must be something in the history somewhere, but this is long associated with a personal name and not the word Cad or cat for battle. So except for one website which I read which said it's probably a Saxon called Cadw. That was one person saying that. Pretty much every other book I've read has said it's Cadw and it's probably Cadwy ap Geraint.
Excellent.
So that's very interesting. So again, when you're talking about, this is where some of the confusions come in. People talking about Cadbury as Camelot, and it's very important to try and separate it from Arthur ap Myrig and from the Silures and stuff like that. However, you've also got to come back around it from the other way and say, well, actually, though, this is the Cador, of the Round Table of Arthur's kings. And yes, he did have a seat of power in this place, and we can link it to a real place and a real person. There is an Arthurian connection. Don't get confused and think, bring Arthur into England and into Wessex, But there is definitely an association, but it's not necessarily the association that you think.
Absolutely. I liked how Geoffrey of Monmouth made that same link as well that you were reading earlier.
Absolutely.
Really good. Cool. I thought there's some interesting names of this area as well, isn't there? Things like Somerton, obviously.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, that one did catch my eye the other day. Boom. What did I want to show? So Portsmouth is the sort of traditional place associated with Longdorf, but I think it's sort of so traditional that hardly anyone actually uses it anymore. I don't. Everyone references it. People say Longbourth's supposed to be Portsmouth, but I haven't read any writer of the last, certainly none of the writers I've looked at for this presentation, and virtually no other, even just sort of quick internet sources like Wikipedia, do actually seriously consider that Portsmouth is the place of Battle of Longbourth. That seems to have been long thrown out. But I thought I'd list it there just because it seems to be one that always recurs. Now, we had Langport suggested in Bartram, and it's also the one that John Fletcher goes for. And it's interesting because one of the things that's always said about Longbourth is about its name as a place for harboring battleships, you know.
Yeah.
And now, although this is the Somerset Levels, and this would have been a lot wetter, and maybe you could get big boats right up to here, it seems like an odd place, being that far inland, to be a Longbourth. You know, it's
it does, doesn't it?
It doesn't quite. I don't know.
What are you saying there?
But if you zoom in, I can't remember here. This is just a screenshot. It does seem like an interesting place, and it could be a very good, should we say, a crux point between the two areas. One thing I think Barber and Pickett even say maybe there were two Longbourths, and there's some confusion, and maybe the later Gerontius died at Langport, and the earlier Geraint died at Longbourth. I don't think we need to do that. I don't think that's necessary, but it's an interesting way around it. And then finally, we've got Lambeth, Penbryn, as suggested by Wilson and Blackett. And in fact, I was reading Wilson and Blackett, and this is one of those things where they've clearly done a lot of research, and it's not just their assumption that Longbourth was at Lambeth and Penbryn. There's a lot of writers throughout history who've suggested it, and there's local tradition as well. So we'll have a look at a few of these. So I think back to Barber and Pickett, just to see on there a little bit about confusion over several Geraints. In the Dark Ages, Geraint was a very popular name, and this simple fact has long caused considerable confusion and led to the Battle of Longbourth being wrongly placed and misdated. Many Arthurian writers have tended to follow the same old standard theories and failed to study the genealogies properly. It would be seen that Geraint Lunasul, I can never pronounce this word, Geraint of the Triad, Geraint the Seafarer, who died at Longbourth, has been confused with his grandson, they say grandson here, who bore the same name. So I don't think grandson works. I think there might have to be another generation in there for him to be his grandson. And there's certainly no genealogy which goes right from 8th century Gerontius through to... But actually, it's only 705 that he received the letter from Oldhelm. So it could be a son of Cubby or Cadwy or Kungar.
Right.
And maybe too young to feature in any of the stories associated with them. Where are we? On examining the life of St. Tilo contained in the Book of Llandaff, we found that a mention is made of a certain Gereinius, king of Cornwall. This is about the story of St. Tilo, who fled the Yellow Plague and promised that he would visit Geraint. On his return from Amorica in 555, Tilo bought a stone sarcophagus as a present for the elderly king, landing at Dingerin, which would be Gerrans on the Roseland Peninsula. Tilo set off to visit the king. He found him alive, but very ill. Shortly after receiving the communion, Gereinius passed away and was laid in the sarcophagus provided by Tilo. Then they mention again this possible burial place of Geraint. They talk about the Geraint that appears in Egadodin. There's a mention of Geraint in Egadodin. And then we have the later Gerontius. now this is another important point. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning, as it said under my title screen for Marinad Geraint, it's often ascribed to Llywarch Hen, and Llywarch Hen was the bard at Arthur's court, according to some triads, and therefore again places him in the 6th century. So it's unlikely that a 6th century poet wrote about an 8th century king. So, Llywarch Hen's elegy represents Geraint, the martyr of Longborth, and Arthur as contemporaries. While the episode relating to Geraint ap Erbin contained in the Mabinogion tells us that Arthur was a cousin of Geraint and the nephew of Erbin. During the wars, the Dumnonian forces obviously accepted Arthur as emperor and superior ruler over their own leader Geraint. Following the death of Geraint at Longborth, it seems that Arthur continued to be accepted as a joint ruler with Cadwy, the son of Geraint. There was another point there that I was going to make. The reference to Arthur in Marinad Geraint. In Egadodin, there's a mention of Arthur as well. But the mention is, it basically says, oh, this guy, he was awesome. But he's not quite as good as Arthur. That's sort of like, he's great, but he's not as great as Arthur.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
And so some people have said, this isn't, and I agree, this is more of one of these sort of legendary sort of references. In Longborth, it says, at Longborth, I saw Arthur.
There's no getting
and
around.
Arthur's no. Yeah. It's quite clear. It's a very different style of reference. It's not just like, oh, this is great and Arthur's great and stuff. It's very much Arthur was there.
Yeah. Nice.
Is there anything more about Longborth in here? I don't think so. So let's go to this book here. So this is from the Western Kingdom. So this is sort of representing an argument for Langport. The existence of a King Geraint is attested in 4 separate sources. The first is the letter addressed to him from Oldhelm, as we've talked about. Nothing important I need to read, other than it shows that Oldhelm has a lot of respect for Geraint. He's very, seems to have, shows that. Indeed, as Probert notes in his study of southwest place names, there appears to be a growing influx of English-speaking settlements in eastern Devon around this time. So this is again in the 8th. This is 705. The lack of Brittonic elements in their settlement names seems to suggest they were founding new farms or villages rather than taking over it from existing ones. So cohabitation of the area.
Yeah.
These newcomers should perhaps be seen as latest in a long line of settlers that Dumnonia and its fast-spanning train network welcomed in. The town names perhaps viewed in the same light as Ogham stones that marked Irish settlements several centuries earlier. This is supported by another of the sources to mention Geraint, an undated charter granting land at Maker. Maker's near St. Germans, and is across the Tamar, actually. It's in Cornwall proper, which is very interesting for an 8th century charter. Helm died in 709. I think that's important to note. And then we're going to have a look at King Einar. So we get to that mention in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Again, Einar and Nun, his kinsman, fought against Geraint, king of the Welsh. And the same year, Higbold was slain. Geraint, king of the Welsh. Again, if you look through a lot of the old medieval things, you'll see Cornwall and Devon regularly referred to as West Wales. So there's no confusion with a Welsh king of this name. This is definitely talking about the same Geraint.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to talk about the Battle of Longborth and the poem. So one thing I find interesting is he's talking about direct sources, and he's talking about mainly these later Saxon sources. And I say later, they're technically earlier, but because they're not medieval reproductions that we get of the British stuff,
Yeah.
So he says he sort of tries to ignore some of the legendary evidence, but then one of his main sources is a poem from the Black Book of Carmarthen, right, which mentions Arthur. So I think there's the confusion doesn't come from the British sources. As we've looked at the British sources, if we look at the Lives of the Saints, this poem, Geoffrey of Monmouth, we get a clear idea of who Geraint and who the Geraint was who died at the Battle of Longbourth. It's only through the introduction of the Saxon stuff that then there becomes a confusion.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So he. This is the sort of problem I have with this is you're sort of taking apart one thing in order to put something else together, and I think why we never really have to suggest that there might be two Longbourths, because there's no mention that this Geraint died at this battle as well in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So actually, one thing that comes up, it hasn't come up here, is there's another mention in the Chronicle from I think the late 6th century about a battle in the West Country, I think near Portchester, which is why Portsmouth gets involved as Longbourth, and where it says a famous young noble Briton died. Now, it's interesting, we've got one where Geraint is named, but it doesn't say he died, and another one from years earlier, which doesn't give a name, but says this person's died. They're not talking about the same person. And if Geraint had died at that battle with Einar and Non, then it would have definitely have mentioned it.
Yeah.
Right? There is no way the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle would have ignored a victory like that. They would have been, oh yeah, we got Geraint, they would have been well chuffed about that. So I think that all of these Saxon sources, all they do is seek to helps nail down this Geraintius, this late king, and we can see his actions, but we know that all these other people we've been looking at previously are linked to the 6th century, and this is outside of that. So I think I'll probably leave that at that, because I'm just getting confused by that. And we'll have a look.
That's awesome.
At Wilson and Blackett, and this is my favourite.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay. It's only a little section in Artorius Rex Discovered. First, there is a poem by Llywelyn Hen, an aged prince and a great poet who was a pensioner at King Arthur's court long before he died. Llywelyn composed an elegy to Geraint, the son of Erbin, the king of Cornwall, who died at the end of the great pestilence which struck most of central and southern Britain, and so died around 562 AD. One of the verses of the elegiac poem, which deals with King Geraint's achievements in life, actually tells of King Arthur fighting at Longbourth, a place identified with Portsmouth, but actually Pembroke Longbourth at Cardigan. And this is consistent with King Arthur returning from Brittany to Britain and fight his way ashore somewhere along the coast of Cardigan Bay. The poem is published in several books, and there's another section from another different translation again of one of the verses. One complication is that Geraint may, according to the poem, be accounted as falling in the Longbourth battle. Much depends on the interpretation of the translated archaic Welsh. For the life of St. Helo tells of St. Helo sending a stone coffin from Brittany to the dying Geraint around 562 AD. Now, I don't think there is actually a problem here, and I'm going to talk this through a little bit. So here we have so it's got Pembroke marked, but right there it's actually now a National Trust property, Llanborth Farm. It's now called.
Okay.
And there's you can have we should go for some camping there at some point or something, or rent out the cottage even. And you got the beach there, which is again good beach for bringing your boats in. And then we go down the valley here. We've got Glenarthon here, so we've got Arthur place names, and we've got Bev Geraint here. And just it's not on modern maps, but just to prove it's real, here it is. I've captured this off Archie UK. We've got Bev Geraint, where apparently there is a number of mounds. And I also read someone's report, which I think you can find from the Google, where they said they got used resistivity, what do they call it? Geo surveying for archaeology, and they reckon one of the mounds is full of metal as well.
Excellent.
But what Wilson and Blackett's saying is that Geraint and Arthur's forces came here to Pembryn to land, to then head up north to Camlan. And it's interesting that Bev Geraint is south of this area. But what this seems like to me is that Geraint was injured at Longborth, and then it was decided to take him home. Now remember, his son-in-law is son of Gwyer Furcham Lord Ledig, who I believe, who was it? Kungar of West Wales, right? So this is Kunnar's land here.
Right.
So he's not, although he's, so when we could say, oh, Geraint isn't buried in Gerrans, as per the life of St. Thilo, but he is in his family's land here. He has relations to this land. And if you think, this direction is also sort of kind of back towards Southeast Wales, almost like, or even back down to the south, and they would take him on a boat home. And it reminds me of the story of Tudrig at Tintern, that the idea was for him to be buried on Flatholm Island, but he died before he got there. So they buried him at Mathern. And I wonder if there is some sort of practice here. He was heavily injured in Longborth. They started taking him back towards either to Kunnar's Keep or something like that, or maybe even towards Southeast Wales, or maybe even towards the south coast, so they could go back to Cornwall.
Yeah.
And he died before then, and so was buried there.
Oh yeah.
Now,
seems plausible.
Yeah. So let's have a look at this. Medieval historians were probably wrong in imagining that King Arthur landed at Portsmouth in England when he came back from Brittany to defeat the rebel Prince Mordred. This supposition is in line with their inability to conceive of Britain containing a number of kingdoms, each existing alongside the others. This reality would destroy the English claim to supremacy over Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, which was the vital cornerstone of English aggression in the British Isles. Aggression against the smaller nations has to be justified somehow. Welsh tradition is firm that King Arthur landed at Pembryn. So Wilson and Blackett at least knew of some sources that say that Arthur landed here at some point.
Yeah.
A place that's 8.5 miles northeast of Cardigan town. There is ample evidence in the area to support the tradition that this was the place where King Arthur landed with his armies to fight the northern Saxon and picked hordes of Mordred. The field called Longborth, or Lambworth, it's now called now, is still there. Lyrich Hen accurately places the site at Longborth, and then he says that they say there's some other place names. So I'd love to have a look at some of the field names for the area, maybe on the old lists. There is Maize Glass, the bloody field. There is Pool Glass, the bloody pool or pit. There is Class Glass, meaning the enclosure of the slaughter. Glass being a shortened version of Galanas. The Maize Glass or bloody plain of field would have been where the battle was fought. Also in the area there is a Lech Ir Ochane, the stone of lamentation, and the Ffynnon Vidog, meaning the bloody well. close to the field of Longborth, the battlefield where King Geraint ap Dugain they've got Dugain in here, which is an interesting name, ap Custennin was killed. There is the farm of Porth Geraint, where by tradition, well, they say Porth Geraint here, but it's actually Beth Geraint, meaning the grave of Geraint, where by tradition King Geraint lies buried. And then they say there's other interesting medieval features in the area, inscribed stones, mounds, things like that, churches. So this is why for me it's just so much stronger than the other options for Longborth, because pretty much all they have is a name, and a kind of makes sense geographical relationship, whereas here we've got three names, and with Arthur as well, Glenarthur as well, we've got three names plus all those field names as well, plus a geography that makes sense, and so that's why for me it's the strongest one. So that's basically the whole lot.
In the spirit of Wilson and Blackett, the Welsh they didn't stutter when they were asserting the history.
No.
It is accurate and reliable. So brilliant.
Yeah. So just to round up, I think you've got an entire dynasty that can be traced historically, can be traced geographically, still in place names and churches, that can be linked to a very specific time and can be linked to all the stories about Arthur as well. So again, it's just adding to that great weight of historicity. Historicity, however you pronounce it. And I think Geraint's family are just a great way to trace that through, and how all the confusions in the mainstream approach to this seem to either be almost forced on the data, or as a result of Saxon meddling. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of like, again, oh well, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles are much more trusted document. What can we find? Oh, we've got this name that comes up. Let's try and jam those things together. Whereas I think there's just enough in the British records in order to be able to sort of critically understand who these people are.
Yeah. Excellent.
Cool.
Excellent.
I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed putting it together.
I love that. That was fantastic. That's that was an absolute truth bomb.
It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot to go through, a lot of reading and stuff. But I think it's worthwhile to sort of see who these people are and how they're connected together.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that, Peter.
That's all right. No problem. Right, breathe. I hope you enjoyed that, folks. I've can now put my massive stack of books away. Just been annoying the missus, leaving them out on the table for ages, so they can go away. I really enjoyed doing that one. I really wanted to cover Geraint and his family. I think they're fascinating, and it sort of seems to be part of my local history that's sort of vanished, but also our shared history with Wales as well. So great to get that done. Me and Adam are just going to have a little chat to you about hopefully what's coming up soon. You've been on a trip to London, haven't you, Adam?
Yeah, we recently went to London. I went to go and see Rob Shaw give his talk at Watkins Books, which is fantastic. I think that was recorded. That'll be up at some point.
Oh, fab! God, I've got to ask you about that actually. Yeah,
it's fantastic. If you want to get into how London plays into this whole Britain's in history thing, then Rob Shaw does his book's fantastic, which is available at the shop as well. Hieroglyphics. I'll put a link up for that. But I spent the day going around. I had a few points of interest which I wanted to get some footage of and just visit for myself. Those included the statues of King Lud and his sons, which was sent to me by Peter, which I was yeah, I was not surprised to find it in an Orthodox church. I'm going to do a video basically on the
Don't
day out
spoil
that
it.
I had.
No spoilers, Adam.
Yeah. But I'm gonna go into a little bit how maybe why the Orthodox Church is upholding the British ethos more than anyone else in Britain. And I went to a few other places as well. I'll go into that and give a little talk on London. And we're going to have Marty back on as well. I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, we're going to follow up on that, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to come back on. So we've got loads in the pipeline. And
I've still got to do an update on the mining, Bronze Age mining stuff. I've got loads of more sites and more data. We just need to get our heads together and record that at some point. But it's on the way. It's on the way, slowly but surely.
Excellent.
I've also got a couple of bits. I've got a great little booklet I found, archaeological description of a Cornish settlement, which was long thought to be Iron Age and actually was second century AD, going right through to the early medieval period, with its own running water and everything. So I'd like to touch back on that, and that will sort of link in with the Roman roads videos and the relationship between Romans and the West Country as well. So we'll do that at some point. That would be cool.
Brilliant.
So yeah, until next time.
Until next time. Thanks for watching and thanks for your continued support. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.